Hi, I'm Robin Klein. I'm Assistant General Counsel with League of Oregon Cities, and we're going to talk about roles and authority of a high-functioning council today. Most local governments in Oregon cities are the council-manager form of government. The council-manager form of government is comprised of these individuals: city council, mayor, council president, city manager, city staff, and citizens. Most people started off in their communities as citizens, and then they may have held one or more of these positions within the council-manager form of government. Where you find what form of government your city is going to be in your charter. The charter is your city's constitution. Each of the 241 cities in Oregon have home rule charter authority, so their charter dictates what form of government they have, as it's their city's constitution. The governing documents that help determine what your role and responsibility is going to be found in your charter, your rules of procedure, resolutions and ordinances, and potentially even employee policies. Specifically defining the roles and responsibilities of City Council as a whole, it really works as a centralized power of authority for the council as a whole. In the charter, you will find what your quorum is. What a quorum is going to be the required minimum number of individuals on city council to move city business forward. A majority of quorum present will be what actually moves a city business item forward. As a centralized body, legislatively, they can create laws of the city, or ordinances, or code. Additionally, they act centrally together to set policy and make the vision of the city possible. They do that by setting goals, either annually or multi-year goals. They also do that through strategic plans, comprehensive plans, and land use plans. Further, in the charter, there will be limited hiring, discipline, and firing authority that's found in the charter of who the city council actually has oversight over on city staff. In a council manager form of government, that individual, the city manager, is going to be one of those individuals that the city council has authority to hire, discipline, and fire. But there may also be individuals such as a city attorney, a municipal judge. It may also include fire chief or police chief. It's all going to depend on what is actually in your charter as to who the city council has authority to manage. Lastly, as a city council, they have sometimes authorities to do things administratively or quasi-judicially. When I talk about limited administrative duties by council members, that's going to look like, let's say, granting or denying a permit. There's going to be already set criteria in which the council is looking at whether or not an applicant for a permit meets those criteria that are already set, and then they determine whether or not, administratively, to grant that permit or deny that permit. That differs from when the city council may be sitting in a quasi-judicial authority power. When I talk about quasi-judicial, it means that the council is not acting legislatively or administratively, but rather they're almost being a judicial authority. What that may look like in some communities, there's a planning commission that makes a land use decision. When that decision is made, one of the parties may appeal it up to the city council. The city council is then, instead of acting in a legislative way, making a decision, they're going to be reviewing the Planning Commission's decision, and that is a more judicial arena that they will be governing in. Mayors generally are the face of the city council. Again, mayors typically have a clause in the city charter that designates the roles and authorities that they have. They're the public face of the community. They represent cities at events. They're the city council spokesperson. Often within the city council meetings themselves, they are the presiding officer. They're charged with keeping order, setting agendas, appointing committee members, signing documents related to public meetings. And often they're also the chief facilitator, both between city staff and other council people. They facilitate discussions between counselors as well as dialogue between council and the city manager. Also found in your charter is going to be a clause on the council president. Generally speaking, I think of the council president as a substitute mayor, and so they are acting mayor when the mayor is absent. Sometimes in a charter, they have to be elected by the city council annually at the first meeting, for example. One thing to also note if you are council president is to check your charter as to whether or not you retain voting privileges when you are acting as mayor in your council president duties. Moving to city management generally. So when I say city manager, that may also be city administrator or city recorder. Those three terms are often interchangeable when we're talking about the city management generally. Each city uses a different term within their charter. So if I use one of those three terms, that's what I'm talking about in city management. What the city manager role and responsibility is could be found in the city charter, and additionally, it may be fleshed out additionally in city council rules of procedure, ordinances, or resolutions. They are the ones that are offering policy support to the council. They're going to make sure that the policy and strategy decisions that the council has elected to move forward with happens. They implement that policy. They are the ones to have staff oversight. Let's say there's a deputy city manager. That position is not going to be mentioned in the charter, and that individual will be oversighted or managed by the city manager themselves, not city council. City managers are also responsible for quasi-judicial adherence to the statutes in Oregon, their charter, and any adopted policies. Think of the city manager or city administrator or city recorder as the chief executive officer to the city, or the CEO. They are managing the city and its personnel. They're doing recruitments. They're doing hiring, supervising, and terminations of city employees that are not mentioned in the city charter. They are preparing the budget and overseeing its preparation for the council's and budget committee's consideration. They're responsible for ensuring the council's vision and strategic plans are brought to fruition. And also think of the city manager as a chief advisor of policy to the city council. They're going to bring objective information about local operations. They're going to bring reasoned analysis and assessments of the benefits and consequences of city council actions, and they will be making policy or staff recommendations for the council to consider. They are a chief advisor as far as policy goes to the city council, whereas the city council is going to be the final decision makers for the general city policies. This is a great infographic as to how both city staff and elected officials work together for the governance and policy process. You'll see on the left that council sets the larger picture policies, mission, goals. They want results. They're going to be setting the general policy. But then the administration somewhat is working on the right side of this infographic. They're taking that policy and they're administrating it and they're managing it. But it does take both together to work to have governance be successful. So now that we've explored the roles and responsibilities and the local governing documents on where to find those roles and responsibilities, you need to think of both your city staff and your city council as a team. Think of it as a sports team. You need to have everyone know their positions. They need to know the strategy. They need to know when to show up to the games and practices. They need to work together to be successful in winning the game that they're playing. So we're going to explore the remaining items on this slide for habits of highly effective councils or teams. Specifically, the city council and city staff need to think and act strategically. What this looks like is the policy big pictures, goal setting, comprehensive plans, strategic plans. You need to know what the existing items are in your city, and then you also need to make sure that you're revisiting them and you're working together in the current group setting to make sure that they align with the overall and overarching goal of that group and team, and make sure that it's clear as to what the vision and mission and values are. Next, you need to understand and demonstrate teamwork together. What does this look like? Well, if you first look at what a group definition is versus a team definition is, the main difference is a group is working independent of each other, and each member has a different set of tasks. Whereas a team is really consisting of interdependent behavior, where people are dependent on one another, share responsibilities, and are judged as a collective. So how and what are the principles of a team? First and foremost, the shared goals. We've talked about thinking and acting strategically. And so that shared goal, what is the long-term vision? What is the policy that you're setting long-term as a city? Those are the shared goals of the city council and city staff together as a team. What that also means is that the outcomes of decisions that that team makes or that council makes is going to have to require shared ownership. So even if you are one member of a council and you are the minority voter and you potentially lose a vote, you have still participated in the decision-making process of that team where you have learned information, you've heard and shared your ideas, there's been deliberation, there's been public comment, and there's been a vote on how to proceed. So even if you are that minority voter, and you must share in that ownership of process and result for it to really become a team dynamic. In tandem with shared ownership, everyone must contribute. Everyone must also express ideas and opinions. These two work together because in a, let's say, public meeting where you are contributing and expressing ideas, each individual on that council, if they are heard and they share from their learned and lived experiences, is not only going to help the collective of that council and staff know where you're coming from and how that decision was made, it's also beneficial from the perspective of the citizen or the constituent that is participating in the public meeting. They too are a part of that public hearing process. It's important that no person feels threatened by conflict. Now, it's inherent within local governing that there's going to be conflict. There are difficult decisions that must be made. There are budget decisions, there are project decisions, there are all sorts of conflict that can arise with how to govern a city. And so it is important that no person feels threatened by this conflict. And it can be developed in that team dynamic, mainly through the presiding officer, making sure that the meeting is facilitated well and that everyone expresses their ideas and opinions, but that decorum is held, there's respect that is garnered and offered, and that no one feels threatened by feeling by expressing and sharing their opinions. The atmosphere of trust and encouragement must also be present for a team to really develop and thrive. And through that, we've talked about participative decision-making. What that means is that essentially everyone knows the council rules of procedure of how public hearings must go forward, public meetings must go forward, and that everyone is sharing their ideas with respect and with important communication skills. It's important when building a team to make sure that you have effective communication skills and you're also employing those communication skills towards others. And you do that through respect of both city staff and fellow councilors as well as your constituents. Having goals together as a team is probably one of the more important items. That's why we talked about setting a strategic plan and goal setting. Having a shared goal as a group is going to transform you into a team. And you may need to pick up knowledge along the way to really be a contributing member. There's different ways to garner knowledge. Not everyone knew everything about how local governance operated, so making sure you attend conferences, you will learn from other counselors and city staff, as well as potentially publications from the LOC website on certain topics. Those are all ways to garner knowledge that can help you in contribution to help your team or city council move forward in a positive direction. Effective small group decision-making is what city councils are all about. You've got a small group of people, sometimes as few as 2, sometimes as most as 12, all going to be a small group decision that needs to be made. How do you do that? you clearly define processes for making decisions. City Council Rules of Procedure is going to be one of the greatest assets in having those clearly defined processes in place, making sure that each member of the group identifies strengths and weaknesses and improves where they can, and that through that process, the group is supporting the collective goals that were shared and set as a group. Moving on to consistently evaluating policy implementation. It's going to be important as a team and as a council for you to evaluate the policy choices that have been made before your time and what decisions you have made as a team moving forward. What does this look like? It's going to vary from city to city. It may be something as simple as a newsletter or a survey that's sent out. It could be information at a town hall or coffee chat with the mayor. These evaluations are important check-ins for the team to know how to move forward and changes to make. It's also going to be important for exploration and analysis as a team. What does this look like as a city council? It's going to be your work sessions. Those are the best places to learn information, ask questions of experts, and collectively learn about one of the important decisions you're going to have to make in a public meeting. Which brings us to the disposition and legislation. That's going to be your public meetings. That's going to be where you make your votes. As a council, that's where you're going to have public comment. And then allocating time appropriately related to community relations. This also is going to be similar to evaluation step before, where you have surveys and newsletters and where you have interfacing with your constituents. Another thing to note for appropriately using your time is going to be virtual public meeting tactics. It's now time where we're all familiar with virtual meetings. So here are some suggestions on how to improve your public meeting skills virtually. Make sure you test the tech before the meeting occurs, and make sure that you're arriving early to resolve any tech issues that are likely going to arise. Make sure you understand the policy for muting, as well as how to remain muted. Introduce yourself both in your profile as well as the start of a meeting, and make sure that if you wouldn't do it on the dais in person, you wouldn't do it on your virtual attendance of the public meeting. That brings us to Council Rules of Procedure. Your local jurisdiction may have adopted rules of procedure that you need to familiarize yourself with. They may need to be reviewed and amended, and that's something you as a collective city council can choose to revisit, review, and amend as needed. But you need to know what's contained in those rules, as they're how the rules of your meetings go. It sets expectations for the public as far as public comment goes. And it's important for the presiding officer as well as councilors to apply and follow the rules equally at each meeting. That helps have respect of the process, both from the council, city staff, and your constituents. It's very important to seek objective assessments. This is not only going to be at each election cycle of whether or not each councilor is elected or not. It's also going to take the form of surveys, newsletters, potentially video updates. These objective assessments may look different city to city, but it's important for you as council, as a team, to get feedback from your constituents as to how you're doing and what can be improved moving forward. We've already talked about continuing education as a core component of developing a team dynamic. This looks at identifying your role. So we've talked about checking your charter, checking your council rules of procedure, checking ordinances or resolutions, and possibly employee policies to identify the scope of your role. Also, what skills are needed and how do you develop those skills? Things like elected essential, municipal fundamentals, small city meetings, LOC conferences. Those are things that you can use to develop skills, both with learning from others that are similarly situated in your elected position, as well as experts that are teaching courses on core concepts of municipal governance. And then learning as a group. That's important for the continuing education component. Learning as a group will help you not only know information together and gather information together, it's going to empower you to become interdependent. Resources for high-functioning councils are going to mainly be found in your charter, council rules of procedure, ordinances, resolutions, adopted policies, and don't forget about LOC publications, specifically the Oregon Municipal Handbook chapter. All of these things can help you develop how to become a high-functioning council.